All right, guys. Very good morning, everyone. Uh, let's get started with today's demo session. Uh, today, uh, basically, I'm going to cover some of the basics of Linux and basics of networking, along with that VM installation, the Linux server installation, and one of the use case on how to use our ready VMs, right? So let's start one by one. Before that, I'll just listed out what we covered yesterday. We understood about course curriculum, and then we started with the uh, you know course fee structure and duration, right? Uh, and also we talked about some of the importance of our course, like dedicated WhatsApp support and the lifetime access of WhatsApp group and all the recorded sessions and all the course materials, everything will be like readily available. uh, you know those everything will be like uh, you can access it lifetime, and in fact you can download it locally. Just to recap on that, so we started understanding with our course curriculum, right? And then we started understanding with the entire course curriculum and what are included and what are will be like what other sections or other content or other topics will be covered as the extra classes, but this is pretty much what we planned for this course. And also we understood about the course structure and the course timings, course fees, and some of the important keynotes about this course. And also we talked about the course material, right? So in once you register with our course, pretty much you'll be having access on the course materials. So in this course material, you're going to get all the content, whatever needed for this particular course. And the recordings will be uploaded on the separate folders. You can access it over there. And in fact, you can download it locally into your laptop. There's no restriction at all. Or these are like lifetime accessible materials. You can access it on our Google Drive, as well as there is no restriction. You can download it locally on that.
Hello, Malik.
Yeah.
My database course recording, that folder you shared with me, I am no longer able to access it.
Yeah, that was the old one. I just moved it out because we are going to start the new one. You're going to pretty much get it over here. But if you need that old recording, I can grant you, I can ping you in our group.
All right. Thank you.
All right, guys. Okay. That we have covered. Just to brief on that. We started with the understanding of a course curriculum and the lab exercise, how will be conducted, and also basic understanding of the networking, basic understanding of the setting up of network, how we can be downloaded and where we can be download and how we can set up. Some of the basics about where you can download your database softwares, database patches, and then basics of your file system and partitions, followed by your Linux, right? Like, how we can mount storage at the backend, and then how we can install the RPM. That's all, at a high level we covered on our yesterday's demo classes. But today what we're going to do, we're going to do one live installation of Linux, followed by some of the basics of networking and basics of Linux. All right, so if I go here, as I said, very first thing, in order to install your Linux, as I said, one of the prerequisites is you to download this Oracle Virtualbox. So Oracle Virtualbox, pretty much, as I told, you can go to your go to Google and then search for Oracle Virtualbox, and then the very first link will be like for downloading your Oracle Virtualbox. Right, so that I already downloaded here. If I can show my screen, this is what Oracle Virtualbox. You just double click on this one. This is just a simple software how you're going to install it on your Windows. So once you download that Oracle Virtualbox, you are going to get that. You're going to double click on that. You can install that Oracle Virtual Manager. So this is going to act as your hypervisor, right? So this is going to be your hypervisor. So it's going to act as your hypervisor. So this hypervisor will help you to install any VM machine. You can install your Windows, you can install your Linux, you can install in Linux various flavors, right? RHEL, Ubuntu, Oracle Enterprise Linux, or any versions, you can install it. So in order to install those VMs on your laptop or desktop, a hypervisor is mandatory. So that hypervisor is nothing but our Oracle Virtualbox, Virtual Manager. So we installed here, and then on top of that, we're gonna go ahead and then create our VM. So I'm gonna create a VM called test VM, test VM1. So for that, once you open your Oracle Virtualbox Manager, click on that new, and then give any name. I can say test VM1, and then I can give you on this location here. I'm getting a comment box here. The voice is breaking. Is that same for everyone? Is that my voice is
clearly audible?
Clear only.
All right, guys. Viju, you can just check your network connection. Yeah, I'm just going to give my VM name. Again, one more time, right? I can just read it. In order to install Linux server, not only Linux server, in order to install VM. So I can just mention it as a VM. VM stands for virtual machine. In order to install VM, that VM might be your Windows VM or the Linux VM, or in the Linux VM, various flavors, right? Your RHEL, Ubuntu, SUSE, or any VM. If you want to install any VM on top of your laptop or desktop, in that laptop or desktop, you should have one hypervisor. Hypervisor is a platform which will virtualize your hardware and resources and allow you to create multiple VMs. For that hypervisor, we are going to use Oracle VirtualBox. There is a other hypervisor in the market, like your VM workstation is also one of the things. VMware providers will give you that VM workstation, but that is not a free of cost. That's a 30 days trial period. After that, you have to purchase a license. But this Oracle VirtualBox provided by this Oracle, it's absolutely free for practice and education purpose. You can always download it and use it. I just downloaded here Oracle VirtualBox. You can just go to Google and you can search for Oracle VirtualBox. You're going to get Oracle VirtualBox 6.1 is the latest one. And once you download this one, just double click. It will just like you're installing the software on your Windows. Once you install it, you can open your VirtualBox here, Virtual Manager, and then you can give any VM name what you want to create, and then you can give path where you want to install that, and that is going to be your Linux, and it will be Oracle 64-bit. Go next. How much RAM you want to allocate for that VM? Right now, this is what whatever the green you are seeing here, the green is one which is like maximum allowed. Like I have total of 32 GB RAM in my laptop. This is a total 32 GB RAM. So this is the limit, hard limit. Like you can give up to 24 GB RAM to any VM. So if you give more than that, it works, but your laptop performance will be like degrades. So you have to.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Sir, you said you have 32 GB in RAM.
Right.
In your laptop. What kind of configuration of your laptop is?
I can share it in our group. What laptop, what version, and other thing. Yeah. You can pretty much, I can give 8 GB because I have enough of RAM in my laptop. I can give 8 GB for one of the VM, not an issue, because I have left with another 24, 25 GB. So I can just go next and then go with all the default option. You no need to change anything here, and go with the VDI and dynamic allocation. And then I'm going to give around 50 GB storage for that VM. The moment I give 50 GB storage, so it's going to take it from my C drive. So out of 32 GB RAM in my VM, I allocated 8 GB to that VM, and I'm going to give hard disk. This is the hard disk. I'm going to give 50 GB to my VM on my C drive. So your configuration is done. So after that, there are few settings you have to do it for that VM. So I'm just going to do settings here. One is in this advanced, in the general advanced section, go with the bidirectional, so that you can do copy paste between your VM and laptop. So this you're going to make it bidirectional. And in the system, what you can do here, fluffy I'm not using, I'll just uncheck that one. I'll just bring it down. So I can give enable this optical and hard disk. These two are like, I'm just keep it as enabled. And going to this processor, I have these many processors, 12 CPUs in my laptop. This is my total number of CPUs. Sometimes you will be having only one CPU, two CPU. So go with one CPU or two CPU, that's more than enough. You don't need to give 4, 5, 2 or like that. You just go with one CPU or two CPU, or go with the default one CPU, not an issue. This is one, like, you have to look for CPUs and you have to uncheck this fluffy in the system. In the general tab, you have to make this advanced bidirectional. These are the two things you have to do it here. And in the display, like always, best practice is VBox VGA. Even though it says invalid settings, but I verified for most of the laptops, most of the screen size, your VBox VGA is well suited. So always go with this VBox VGA as your display setting here. And then storage, leave it blank and leave it blank. And in the networking, make sure that you can enable this adapter 1 and adapter 2. Do checkbox these two, adapter 1 and adapter 2. And then adapter 1, you can make it as a bridge adapter, and adapter 2, you can make it as a NAT adapter, or again, you can make it as a bridge adapter or host only adapter, doesn't matter. But for adapter 1, make it as always bridge adapter. Adapter 2, you can make it any one of bridge adapter or NAT or host only adapter, anything is fine. I'll just go with the bridge adapter, both of them. Right, so other than that, these are we're not using right now. We'll explain one to you, this shared folders and all. So just click OK. So that is your VM configuration and settings. So you can, in order to install your VM, you're going to do download this Oracle VirtualBox and install. And then second thing is configure your VM. So in case it will be like mine is test VM1 I'm installing. I'm just gonna configure it. I configured this test VM1 here. And then after that, we need to start with the installation, right? Create VM or the install or create VM. Now I need to install or create a VM. But in order to do install or create a VM, what I need an ISO image. Need ISO image. ISO image of your Linux or your Windows. So if you're installing Windows, you need a Windows ISO image. If you're installing Linux, you need a Linux ISO image. Where you are going to download this Linux ISO image from Oracle eDelivery, right? So if I go here, again Google Oracle eDelivery. eDelivery.oracle.com. Sign in. Again, you can create your account with your Gmail ID. Right, so you can go ahead and then download your ISO image. So if I go with Oracle Linux, right, so Oracle Linux, and I'm gonna pretty much go with this 7.9. That's a version I'm gonna teach here. So just click on that one. If you want to practice on 8. Or 7. You can just download, or even you can 6.0 you can download. Even like 5. All the versions are available. Like pretty much this is a stable one, 7.9 in 7. version. So I'm just gonna go ahead and continue, and then go with your x86 64-bit, continue, and your license agreement, continue. And there are a lot of ISO they will provide, but very first one is your ISO image of Oracle and Oracle Linux release 7 update 9, which is 4.5 gig. Just click on this one, it'll start downloading it locally on your laptop. Right, it will ask you where to download, right? So I'm not gonna download that because I already downloaded here. If you see this one, ending with 6990-01, 6990-0, and this is your ISO image. So I just renamed it as OEL 7.9, this ISO image. Yeah.
Sir, how do you find first one is the correct image? Is there any keyword?
No, that I know because I worked on this one. Like how you can identify this is your boot ISO image. It's not a complete ISO image. Boot ISO image in case of VM crashed, we're gonna use this ISO and then we can boot that VM. And then it is again boot ISO image. These are like your boot ISO image. And this is your DVD. So DVD 1 and DVD 2, these are like your DVDs. We're not gonna use the DVDs. And your these are your Windows, your virtual drivers. So we're not using that virtual drivers, or we're not using the DVDs. And these are my boot images. So by including all of them, this is my first ISO image is the good one.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, your ISO image is ready here. So I can just take this path. I'll go here. I can just start this one. The moment I start, it'll automatically boot. Or else like it'll ask you to insert your ISO image the moment you start this one. Or the other way to insert your ISO image, click on the settings, go to your storage here, and this is empty. This ISO image is empty right now. And then you can click on this here and you can choose this 7.2, right? Or if you don't see this here, you can choose a disk file here. Right, you can gonna get this one here. Go to that particular path here, and once you go browse there, you can open that. Open here, so you can see this ISO image is tagged here, right? And then you can click OK. The moment you start it now, it'll automatically boot it from that ISO image. Right, you can see it here. It's gonna start installing your ISO image here. So you can go with the first one. First option, install Oracle Linux 7.9. So use your up arrow keys and then proceed with that installation. So I'm gonna just show that installation here in my other screen. Right, so if I go with the first option, enter. Right, so it's gonna take few minutes. Okay, now you are getting this welcome screen. Continue with that. Preferred language, I'll go with English. And then you can choose your date and time and location. Date and time, just click and then select whatever the region you are in. Your keyboard language support, I'll just leave it blank, leave it as it is default. Your installation source is your ISO image. Just click on that. You can verify that ISO image. And then your software selection is very important. Just select top software selection. You have to always go with the server with the GUI mode. Always go with the server with the GUI mode. Other than this, I'm just going to ignore this. If you go with this, any of these options, you're not going to getting that GUI mode. You have to always go with the server with the GUI mode. Once you select this one, you're going to select few packages in this right hand side here. One is your development tools and compatible with libraries. So these two you're going to select here once you select the server with the GUI mode.
About that keyboard selection, my laptop has finished keyboard, so
Yeah.
I can change the layout of keyboard, right?
Right. You can change that.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Once you select this softwares, your installation directory. Here, like 50 GB the drive what you selected, and then you have to click on this. I will configure my partitions. I'll just click OK. You have to select this one. Click OK, and then here, if you see, like I have talked about these many partitions in Linux. you no need to create all of these partitions, but for our lab or for practice purpose, we need basic 3 partitions. One is just click on this LVM, that default one, click on this plus symbol. One is your very first one is your /boot. So minimum 600 MB boot partition is needed. Boot partition, again, as I said, it is your boot. It's kind of a C drive in your Windows. All your booting files, right? So in order to start that server, all the C drive will be having your Windows and program files and all those configuration files, right? So all the booting files will be available inside this boot. We need a minimum 600 MB, but for that I'll go with the 1 GB as a default. That's a boot first partition we need. And the second one is your swap. Swap will be always double of your RAM. So if you given 8 GB RAM, you can go with the 16 GB as your swap. Or if you given 10 GB RAM, you can go with the 20 GB as your swap. If you given 4 GB RAM, you can go with the 8 GB of your swap memory. So these are the two, and remaining you can go with your just a root partition, just slash. I'll just don't mention anything, I'll just add it. So these are the 3 mandatory partitions you have to provide in order to set up your VM. One is your boot, always need a 600 MB, but I'll go with the 1 GB default. And your swap should be double of your RAM. And then once you given 1 GB and 16 GB here, almost we how much we given for swap? We given 15 GB and we given 1 GB for boot, 16 GB gone. So remaining 34 GB is for my root.
The RAM is 8 GB selected now. It should be 16 GB according to that.
Yeah, default ideally go with a 16 GB or lesser than that also fine.
Okay.
So once that is done, click OK. Accept these changes. Again, these are like not needed. Host name, network, later we can do it, and then start with the begin installation. That's it. So your installation will start, and you have to set your root password here.
Sir, what is the use of swap memory, sir? Why we need to give double for the
swap memory? Why we need in case of when your server 8 GB whatever you've given, if the server 8 GB RAM is completely used by your some of the OS processor, some of the application servers, your server will hang. So in order to avoid that server getting hang, your swap will act as your RAM, and then all your reads and writes will use that disk space swap memory, and then swap will virtually act as a RAM and it will serve all the IOs. So because of that, reads and writes you're doing it from the disk. So it is recommended to always give double of your RAM. So you can see these are the RPM, 1469 RPM. So it will take around 5 to 10 minutes, this entire VM installation. And then meantime, once this VM installation is done, your VM is ready. And then you can start with your database installation, right? So now what I can show you, meantime, this is going to take around 10 minutes. I'll just minimize this one. Meantime, what I can do, just close this one here. Okay, that installation going on in other screen. What I talked about, this ready VMs, right? How to use a ready VMs. So you have to do all this, like, download your ISO image, and you have to configure your settings here, and you have to install your VM. So if you don't want to do all of that, you can directly go to Google Drive and then go to this ready VMs and just download one of this VM here. Just download locally here. I had downloaded one VM here. Where is that? Okay, so this is Oracle Lab 1. I just downloaded from here, Oracle Lab 1. So what I can do, I can simply I can extract this one here, like extract here. The moment I extract this Oracle Lab 1, I can see this Oracle Lab 1 folder will get created. And then I can directly add this VM to my Virtualbox here. Within 1 or 2 minutes, my entire VM will be ready. I no need to do that installation. Let it unzip, I can show you that. Right, so it's unzipped here. Go inside that and copy this path, and then go to your Oracle Virtualbox, and then go to your tools, and then instead of create new, you can put this, click on this add button here, and then give that path where you unzipped, and then you can browse this, whatever this blue color one, right? Open this one. So your VM is ready. You no need to do all this installation. So this installation is going to take around 10 minutes or 15 minutes based upon your RAM or memory or laptop speed. So if you don't want to do that, like, you can just configure here, your VM is ready, you can just start it. Your VM is ready. And then this is just a empty VM, so that we have a similarly VM with the databases, VM with the ASM, and VM with ASM and databases. You can just download and use them. Right, you can see I'm just starting my VM here now. Right, it's getting started here now. Right, so your VM is ready. You can just log in. I'll just use a root user, that's a master user. Right, so my VM is ready. I can just start working on this. I can start installing my databases, and I can start installing host name, and then ifconfig. So the moment I do ifconfig, I can get this IP addresses here. I can just copy this IP address, and then I can go to my mobile extrem here. So I can go to this mobile extrem. I can simply click on this new session SSH. I can give that IP address of that VM, and then click OK, and I can connect with the root. Password on that, right? So I can connect it to my Oracle Lab 1 host name, ifconfig. So all those things, whatever you are seeing it on this GUI mode here, so you can connect with your mobile extrem command line. So these are the tools what I talked about in yesterday's class, right? So as a DBA, we're going to use mobile extrem or the putty session. So putty session, I have it here. So putty session is here. Putty session also, if I click on this, if I copy that IP address, click on open, and then I can connect with the root user, and then I can enter the password for that root user. Right, so I connected to my putty session here. That's the one thing, like, I can connect to putty, I can use putty, or I can use mobile extrem. Both are like the terminals to connect to your Linux servers via port 22. Like your putty session, it's just a black and white screen. You cannot feel that, but mobile extrem is, I'm very much familiar with that. It has a lot of advantages with the mobile extrem. You can pretty much use mobile extrem with the colorful, like it automatically auto detects all the colors, and then it will display it here. That's one thing, like what we planned. Like your installation is still going on this one, so as I said, it's going to take around 5 to 10 or 15 minutes max of this installation. But yeah, meantime, we already done with our setup here. If you have ready VMs, you can directly just upload them, add them, and then start them, and then start with the installation. Right, so that's about VMs. Okay, what else? I'll just connect one more VM here. This is my other VM. I'm just going to take here now. Right, so you can stop me if you're getting confused or if you're having doubts or questions. So this is also same Oracle Lab 1, but the different IP. What we can do here now, we can little bit understand some of the basics on Linux. I hope so far it's clear here, right? One is like downloading your Oracle Virtualbox and installing and configuring your VM. And once the VM configuration is done, you have to download your ISO image from Oracle eDelivery. Once the ISO image is ready, you're going to install or create your VM. So that's going to conclude your VM configuration. Once that is done, so we're going to start with the ASM installation. So that ASM installation, we're going to take it during our actual course, and database installation. No, I cannot hear you. Pranay, like, is it only for me or anybody?
No, I'm also unable to enable now.
It looks like he has a slow network.
Let me mute. Sorry for that disturbance.
Could you please mute? Actually, this is annoying.
I was just trying to mute. It was not. Is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
no,
Yes,
perfect.
it's clear now.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So we are going to take. That's one of the prerequisites, right? Like we need a VM server in order to do with our database course, right? In order to install your ASM or in order to install your database. Setting up of your VM is one of the mandatory tasks. So again, if you talk about a real-time industry practice, it is absolutely out of DBA scope. We are not doing this job. This will be done by your Linux admin, and all the network configuration will be done by your network team, and they will just provide you a ready VM like this. And once the VMs are ready, and then our DBA job will start. So we'll start with the installation of ASM, installation of database, installation of database software, creation of database, and prior to creation of this database and all, we're going to request Linux admin again, create users, directories and all. They have to create, because the root user has access to create all those directories, users, and the permissions and all. So because DBA will not be having a root access. Right now, if you see, I logged in as a root user here. So this is my root user here. So I can do whatever I want here. But in a real-time industry, your Linux admin will create a VM. This particular VM, he will create it, and he will create a Oracle user. He will give you Oracle user and Oracle password. You have to connect with Oracle user and Oracle password, and you will not be having access to create a directories, create a users and all. Everything will be done by your Linux admin, but we will be just logging with the Oracle user, and we'll start with the installation of my ASM, installation of Oracle home, and creation of my database. So that's our DBA task. But since we're working on lab in our own laptop, we're setting up our own lab. So we'll be having a full access. So we'll be doing all these tasks. And it's a good to understand because once you're aware of this, you know, like what to ask with your Linux team, what to ask with your network team, right? This is what I showed you here, ready VM. Just download them, attach them, your VMs are ready. Right now, let's talk about some of the basics of networking and the Linux. That's I'm gonna cover it here. First, we'll talk about this networking. When it comes to your VM here, the networking, right? As I said, like if you see like your ENS 3, ENS 8, these are the two interfaces. We can call it as the interfaces. The moment you do IF config, these are called as the interfaces. So why it is showing two only here? Because we selected two interfaces. If I go back here, if I go to settings, and if I go to network, since I selected the adapter 1, adapter 2, because of that, I got two interfaces here. They will call it as the interfaces. When you logged into your client machine, you can see Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1, or you can say this is not names, are just a names. It's not a fixed naming convention. You may see Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1, or ENS or ENP. I'm seeing ENP here, and sometimes you may see ENS. You don't worry about that. Those are the names. Those are the interfaces. and associated to your VMs. These are the two interfaces are associated. One is my public network. This is my public network. This is coming from my internet provider. Since my laptop is connected to internet, and then since I selected this as a bridge adapter here, so this bridge adapter means the IP will be assigned automatically from my internet provider. And then this is my 10.03.15. That's a NAT adapter. If I go back here, adapter 2, that's a NAT adapter. That will be your virtual, that will be your private network. Within that VM, you can access within your network. It cannot be publicly accessed outside. So that's your private network because of the NAT you selected here. If you make it as a bridge adapter again that IP will get changed to 192.168 with the public network. So these IPs, you can change it manually. These are like dynamic IPs are automatically assigned by your internet provider or the whatever the provider you are connected with your VM. So you can go to your application, your system tools and settings, and you're going to see your interfaces here. ENP0S3, ENP0S8. You can click on the settings here and you can see this IP is coming. Connect automatically and your identity and your IPv4. You can see it's a DHCP, dynamic host configuration protocol. That automatic DHCP means automatically IP will be provided by your internet provider here. And then if you want to do manually, want to assign, you can assign it. You can go with like, I'll just cancel this one. I'll go to second one. This is like go with NP8, like I can make it as a manual. I can give it the same name, 192.168.1.150. I can just go with 150 and 255.255.255.0 and gateway. I'll just leave it blank. Apply. So we'll just stop it and then start it. So this is going to be your stop and start. You're going to do it GUI mode here, stop and start. Or if you're connected here, you can do it ifconfig. So you can see your ENS83, the second one, S8, it got changed to 150, whatever we changed. You can do IF down your interface, IF down. You're gonna remove this IP. You're gonna bring it down, successfully down. IF config. You can see this particular ENS8, it gone, IP gone because we brought it down here. And then you can make it IF up. And then you can provide your interface. Right, so successfully activated IF config. You got your IP address back. So this is your static IP address. Manually we assigned. This is your dynamic IP address, DHCP one, right? Right, so let's go back here. We're going to talk about DHCP, DNS, name server, forward name resolution, and reverse name resolution. What this DNS name stands for? It's a domain name system, a domain name server, and each and every organization will be having its own DNS. For example, if I consider Infosys as a one of the entity or organization, Infosys will be having its own domain, infosys.com. If I consider Wipro as one of the entity, Wipro will be having their own domain like wipro.com. If I consider Oracle as one of the entity, they will be having their own domain, oracle.com. So DNS is the huge blade server, I can say. All the whatever like your host name to IP address or IP address to host name, all the name resolution will happen through that DNS. Each and every organization will be having their own DNS server with their domain.com. As I say, like TCS is one of the entity. They will be having their own domain like tcs.com. That's a main server. All the name resolutions, your fully qualified host name to IP address or IP address to host name, all the name resolution will happen through the DNS server. And as I said, DHCP is a dynamic host configuration protocol. The moment you create any VM, and if you give that VM as a particular subnet, automatically the IP will be assigned with that DHCP server. The DHCP server, again, one of the blade server. You can configure that DHCP as a separate server, or you can configure that DHCP server as within the name DNS server. Most of the time, DHCP server, they will configure it separately. They will not merge with the DNS server. So any VM you create, automatically that broadcast IP will be like, look for DHCP server in that network, and then ask for the IP address, and your DHCP server will pass the IP address, and then IP will be assigned to that particular newly created VM. Right. Name server. Right. What, as I say, like, DNS server will do all your fully qualified host name to IP address, or IP address to host name, all the forward resolution and reverse resolution. That's what mean here, like forward DNS, reverse DNS. Forward DNS is like, the DNS queried for the host name of a certain IP address. Forward DNS, like, if you give IP address, it's gonna give you host name. The moment you give you host name, it's gonna give you IP address. That's the reverse DNS, forward and reverse. These two will be served with the help of DNS server. But what's the use of our name server? Name server is like one of the specialized server in the internet, which will help my DNS server. Like, for example, your DNS server somewhere sits on some remote data center. I can say London is my data center where my DNS server sits. If I'm sitting in India, if I do a forward name resolution or reverse name resolution, my request has to go to London and it has to come back here. So in order to do that, it will be like a lot of transmission wait times, right, between India to London. So in order to avoid that, so they will put a name server on each of these regions. In India, they will put one name server. The moment I do this forward name resolution or reverse name resolution, my request will go to name server. Via name server, the request will further go to DNS server. So this name server will automatically pull all the cache information from DNS server, and then it will put it inside the name server. The moment I give request to name server itself directly revert back the fully qualified host name or the IP addresses. So this, in order to serve your DNS queries, your name server comes into picture. And again, some customers, the small enterprises, they will put a name server inside the DNS server. They cannot bear that name server cost and the DNS server cost. They will put DNS server and name server in a single server. Or if big enterprises, for example, Oracle is one of the big enterprise, Oracle.com, they will be having a main data center, and they will be having a different name server in the different regions, right? So that's a use case of your name server. Right. So any questions here, guys, so far?
So, sir, name server, could you just explain with some example?
I can do it in a minute. Wait a second. Right. Let's talk about this DNS, right? DNS, what we can do. Okay, let me take one of my lab. Okay, I can explain it here in my sprint. Right. If I take, I have two servers here. This is my, let's make it smaller on 16. Okay. This is my lab 1, and this is my lab 2. And then this has the IP address 192.168.1.100. So this is like 1.101. So if I go here, host name, NS lookup, I'll not be getting a correct IP because I don't have a DNS server here, right? I'll just take this here. The moment I do NS lookup, I'll just make it as a lab 1 here. NS lookup lab 1, and then here I'll make it NS lookup lab 2 here. So the moment I made NS lookup lab 1, I should get my IP address. So the moment I make this one, the moment I make this one NS lookup of lab1, I should get a IP address here. And then the moment I make NS lookup of my lab2, I should get again IP address of my lab2. I should get this IP address 192.168.1.101. And the moment I do NS lookup of lab1, I should get IP address of NS lookup lab1 IP address. So the moment I do NS lookup of my IP address here, 192.168.1.100. So if I make a NS lookup of my IP address here, so then ideally I should get a host name here. That will be your lab1. So similarly, if I do NS lookup of my lab2 IP address, that's 101, and then I should get a lab2 host name. So in industry, any server you log in, the moment you do NS lookup of those IP addresses or host name, you will get a equivalent host name or IP addresses. Those are called forward name resolution and reverse name resolution. How this will be possible? So that will be possible because they will be having something called DNS server here. DNS server, they will be having it. That DNS server will be having your database inside the cache database or metadata database. So they will be having lab1 and IP address, lab2 and IP addresses. All those, whatever the servers in your entire organization, whatever the VMs, whatever the servers, whatever you have it, all those IP addresses, all the host name, everything will be available inside that DNS server, right? The moment you connect your lab1 or lab2, the moment you do request for IP address or the host name, your request will go to your DNS server, and from the DNS server, the response will comes, right? So that's how it works. In order to do like this, region is in India. This is on India, and then this is on your DNS server is on London, because you'll be having one DNS server for each organization. You cannot have multiple DNS servers. It will be in your London data center, and you are in India here, and then so every time all the request and queries will go to London data center and coming back, it will be like lot of network transmit or retransmit waits. So just to avoid that, they will have a local server that will be called your name server. They will configure it within the India region. They will configure one name server here. What that name server will do, the moment you query, it will take all this request. The moment you do NS lookup of a host name or the IP address, the first request will go to your name server, and name server already has that cached information. DNS server is already passed that information to your name server. Via name server, you will immediately get a response back. And if there's any modification, the DNS IPs or the, for example, if you change this IP address, automatically that will be updated into your DNS server via your name server. And then again, that cached information comes back and sits on your name server. So your request and response should not go to your DNS server. Via name server will directly send the response, and later at the backend, your name server will communicate with your DNS server, and it will update all the metadata or whatever the changes you need. So this is kind of just to avoid that network retransmit or transmit between the different data center regions. They will come up with one name server for each region. Or in small scale industry, small startup companies and all, so they're not gonna offer these name servers. What they will do, they will directly put this name servers and DNS servers in one single server. So I can just make it here. They will just remove this one. So they will okay, I'll just remove this one. I can make this DNS / our name server. So all your request, if you make your DNS server and name server in a single server, so obviously your all request has to go from your lab 1 to your DNS server or the name server, and the request has to come. So in a big organization, they will have a name server on each of those regions, so that you can avoid that network transmit when you were querying. I'm just talking about NS lookup as an example, but it's applicable for each and every queries. Like if you're running any application on this particular lab 1, and whatever that URL you are going to hit, that has to go to your DNS server and it has to come back. And if you're using Apache or Tomcat server, and if you're accessing your user or browser, so all those requests has to go to your DNS server and it has to come back. So that's a use case of your name server. It's a specialized internet specialized handling server, especially it queries your domain server. So what that name server, it act as a mediator between your clients and your DNS servers. Or that is again subjected. It's not mandatory. It's optional. You can have a separate server, or you can merge that name server within your DNS server, right? And then it's gonna one of the primary server which will help for this name resolution, forward name and reverse name. If you don't have name server, directly your client will communicate to your DNS server, and your DNS server will help on that forward name resolution and reverse name resolution. All right. Any questions on this, guys?
Thank you, sir. I got it.
Right. So quickly, we can take a few more queries here. And then a question comes here, how I can set up this DNS server here in the lab. We don't have it here. If you see, right, this is my lab. This is my lab, what we installed, Oracle Lab 1. This is what we set up here, Oracle Lab 1. And then if I do NS lookup and all, I'll not be getting a proper response. For example, if I see here, if I do host name, Oracle Lab 1 localdomain.com, the moment I do NS lookup of my host name, ideally I should get this IP address, right? 192.168.1.8, but I'm not getting it. I'm getting some random IP here. Why I'm getting this random IP? Because this is my internal lab virtual machine, what we created. It will not give you a proper name. So for that, we have something called bind RPMs. So bind stands for Barclay Internet Naming Daemon. If you install this bind RPM, you can configure your DNS server here. I'll just remove everything and then I can take a new slide here. Don't see. Okay. So what I can do, I can create 2 VMs here, and then I can create one separate VM here. This will be like a DNS server. I can create one separate VM. So I can create Oracle Lab 1, and then I can create my Oracle Lab 2 here. I can create 2 servers, 2 VMs. For example, here I'm talking about Oracle Lab 1 I installed. I can install Oracle Lab 2. I can install one more server called DNS server. And here in this server, I'm going to install bind RPMs. The moment I install bind RPMs, and then manually I can register this particular Oracle Lab 1. Once I install that Oracle Lab 1 with the IP address, and Oracle Lab 2 with the IP address. Let's see. I can manually, the bind RPMs are mandatory. That bind RPM will help to make this server as a DNS server. You have to install that bind RPM on this server. That's again one of your Virtualbox. Once the bind RPMs are installed, you have to manually add your host names and IP addresses. The moment you add your host name and IP addresses on that one of the configuration file, this server will act as a DNS server. The moment you do NS lookup of host name, the query will go to your DNS server and then it will get the IP address. The moment you do NS lookup of IP address, the query will go to your DNS server and it will get the host name for that. So this is your lab setup. You're going to do it. So especially this is needed when you're doing a 2-node rack setup. When you want to configure your rack setup in your lab environment, so you're going to use this DNS server. So that's what I explained here. You're going to install this bind RPM. Once you install this bind RPM, you're going to configure in this etc name.config file will get create. The moment you install this bind, your name.config file will get create here. And in that name.config file, you're gonna put your DNS server details. So ideally, this is how you need to do. You have to configure lab 1, lab 2, and then you have to configure separate DNS server. You have to install 3 servers. But ideally, what happens? Most of us will be having only 16 GB RAM, right? So if I give 7 GB RAM here, and if I give 7 GB RAM, already 14 GB RAM gone. So out of 16 GB, like left with only 2 GB. So I cannot create one more server. So in that case, what ideally, I prefer to do, I'll go with this approach here. I'll create one lab 1 and lab 2. This like no, I'm talking about in respect to rack setup. I'm going to do it as a node 1, and then I'm going to do it as a node 2 here. So I don't have enough resource in my laptop to create one more lab server here for the DNS server. So what I'll do, I'll make this as a DNS server. DNS server. So node 1 itself, I'll make it as a DNS server. And then the moment I do NS lookup of node 1, request will go to node 1 only, and it will get the IP address. The moment I do NS lookup of IP address on node 1, again the request will go on the same node, and it will get the host name. And the moment I do NS lookup of node 2, again the request will go to node 1, and it will get the IP address. The moment I do NS lookup of IP address of node 2, it will go to the request will go to node 1, and get the IP address. So I'm gonna install ASM1 here, and I'm gonna install ASM2 here. So by doing this, what happens within these 2 rack nodes, and you're gonna achieve your DNS server with one of the nodes. So that also possible. You can, this particular node will act as a one of your rack cluster node, and also we made that as a DNS server. So whenever any request within the node only it will get the resolution. But if any other node will do a resolution, it will go to node 1 and it will get the resolution. So with the single 2 node, you can able to achieve DNS, and also you're able to do your rack setup. That also possible. So when I talk about my rack courses, I pretty much go with the this approach, this configuration. If you have enough resource, you can go with this approach, separate server. That's also well and good. If you don't have enough resource, you can do it within the same rack cluster node itself. One of the node you can pick it up and you can make it as a DNS server. Right? Yeah, I'll just take one of my lab setup here. I can show you that how I did it, and then we can do a few of the other checks in a minute. Let me get that one in a minute here. Right, so let's go here. I'll just connect 2 of my rack nodes here, 2 of my other VMs where I set up this rack. Root. You can feel free to ask any queries. Meantime, I'll just connect to this server here.
So for DNS server, we can like keep the RAM size like 2 GB or.
Oh yeah, that you can do it.
Minimum we can do it, right? Because only the DNS service is running on that server now.
Right. Yeah, you can put it. Right, you can put it 2 GB minimum, of even 1 GB after installing. Like if you put a 2 GB and then start with your installation will go for 40 minutes or 50 minutes. While installation, you can put it as a 8 GB and then start with your installation. Within 10 minutes, your installation will get complete. Once the installation is done, you can shut down your VM and you can go back here, go to settings, and you can reduce that VM here. Like memory, you can reduce it to 1 GB. Right. This is what it looks here. This is my node 1 host name. This is my node 1, and then this is my node 2. You can see this is my node 1 and node 2. and my ASM1 is running here, ps-ef grep smon. My ASM2 is running here, and then my ASM1 is running here, right? So this is a 2-node rack setup, but within the 2-node, I have configured my node 1 as a DNS server. How I configured my node 1 as a DNS server? I installed bind RPM here. For example, RPM-QA grep bind. So these are my bind RPMs. The moment you install this bind RPM here, as I said, where is that here? Like, the moment you do install bind, you're going to install a couple of RPMs here. These are the RPMs I installed on this particular node 1. And the moment I install this bind RPM, this particular node 1 is ready for configuring as a DNS server. So one of the configuration file is your named.config file. You have to mention this server as a DNS server. This is the IP address you need to provide here. So if I do cat of that, if I do ifconfig, so this is the IP address 10.38.4.133. This is the IP address of my node 1. So if I do cat of that name.config, you have to give that IP address of that server, right? So here it is. So the first thing is here, like, you have to give that IP address of that server. The moment you mention that IP address, so you're telling that this is the DNS server. So you're making that server as a DNS server. In this name.config, you're going to give that IP address, and whatever the IP subnet, whatever coming here in this particular range, all those IP addresses will be resolved through this particular host. So if I have any server like 10.38.4, 130, 131, 132, whatever the IP coming in this particular range, all will come to request will come to this node 1, and the resolution will happen through this node 1. So this is one thing, like, you have to set up this one, and you have to do this forward resolution and then the reverse resolution here. These are your forward zone and the reverse zone. What are those forward zone and reverse zone? So as I said here,
IP to host, host to IP.
yeah, you have to put that one manually. You have to put, because it's not automated as per the industry standard, right? We just install the blind RPM, and manually we are putting IP addresses and host names, and we're putting that forward zone and reverse zone. So you can
forward means IP to host, right?
Yeah, your forward zone means your host name to IP address.
Host name to IP, okay.
Reverse means your IP to host.
IP to host. Okay.
So where on which files we are putting those details, you can get it here. Like, your etc, you are going to mention in that particular configuration file. Okay, this is my forward zone, and then this is my reverse zone file. Whatever name you can provide here, and then in that file you have to put all these entries here. You can see where is that. I don't have that. Okay, here, your localdomain.com. What I'm putting it here, node name to IP address, node name to IP address, my virtual IP address to node host name to IP address, scan host name to IP address. So your host name to IP address, and in the reverse zone, what you're going to do it here, you're just going to mention just a last 3 digits, last digit of your IP. 133, it will be pointing to my host name. Like, where is that 133? 133, that's pointing to my node 1, and then 145 is pointing to my scan. So you can just put just a last digit of your IP and then put the host name. You can put all of them, but I just given few of them as example.
So we have taken these 4 only.
Yeah, because when you do a rack setup, only your this IP, like host name to IP address, is the mandatory. From IP address to host name is not a mandatory. So this is not needed at all when the rack setup. So if you want, you can put all those entries, whatever you're keeping it here, the same entries you can put it here. That also works. Great. And then after doing all of them here, now if I do host name, and then if I do NS lookup here, probably I need to restart service named restart. And then if I do NS lookup of node 1, I'm going to get my node 1 IP address. If I do NS lookup of my node 2, I'm going to get my node 2 IP address. So if I do the same thing, if I go to node 2, and if I do NS lookup of node 1, I can, so again, I need to restart service restart, service named restart. Right, so the moment I do ns lookup of node 1, I'm going to get IP address 133. And if I do same thing, ns lookup of node 2, I'm going to get IP address of that node 2. So what we achieved here, like within this two node, node 1, we made it as a DNS server by just modifying this name.config file. So once you edit this name.config file, you can give the DNS server IP. That's a node IP itself of that node. If you're going with this approach here, you have to give the IP address of the DNS server on this. You have to configure that name.config file here, and you have to give that IP address of that DNS server. And then once you modify this name.config, inside that you're going to give this forward name and the reverse name resolution. And the forward name and reverse name resolution, you're going to create those files here. These are the two files you're going to inside where named. If I go inside where named, cd where named, so you're going to create this forward zone and the reverse zone, whatever order you want, like whatever the name you want, you can just provide that your host name to IP address, or IP address to host name, your IP address to host name. Right, so those are your manual setup in, especially for this particular database course. This, whatever the network setup, what I explained so far, it is not needed because we're not going to do with any rack setup. So what I'm talking, this will be one of the mandatory tasks for your rack installation. Right, let's go back here. Few of the other basic things we'll just quickly cover. One is your host name. If you log in with your again, like I'll tell you, like I'll just close all of these servers, or else I can take it here. Like when your server is ready, like so far what we did, like we installed our server. Once the server is ready, once the IP addresses are assigned, by doing a fresh installation or by using a ready VM, your VM is up and running here. Your VM is up and running here, and you're just going to start that VM. The moment you start your VM will get started here. And then you can connect here with the root user. You can just, if you don't see that root user, you can just click on that another user, log in with another user, and then it will ask you to enter the username. So I can just not listed, I can just put it not listed here. And username, I can put any username. Right now, if I do with the root user, I can just log in with the root user. So this is one thing, like this is a GUI mode. You can log in or you can access to your server. And once you log in here, you can right click and you can open the terminal and you can do all the commands here. Host name, host name, and then ifconfig. You can do all the commands here in this terminal. So once you get this IP address here, the moment you do ifconfig, you're going to get this IP address. You can just take that IP address, and then you can go to your mobile term and you can click on this session here, and then you're going to get it. In IT, in real-time word example, how like once you go to any organization, they will give you like Oracle Lab 1 dot local domain, or like wipro.com or tcs.com, and then the IP. They will give you like this IP, and then they will give you, sometimes they will give you root user and then the password, and sometimes they will create your own user. Right, so they will give you all these details, right? They're different servers. They will give you all those details. They will be having their own inventory. As a DBA, like I'll just take IP address. I'll just take a host name, any one of that. And then I can go to my putty session. I can click on this new session, SSH. I can give that IP address or the host name. I can click on connect, and then it'll ask for the username, root, or our respective user. Right, so I'm able to connect here with the root user. So if I go with the same thing, if I have my own user, I can go with my own user, Malik. I can connect with my own user here. So whatever the practice your organization follows, individual user. After that, I can do su root, su oracle, whatever the password or sudo password, whatever I want, I can do it. So this is how we can access any server, any Linux server, Windows server. Windows is a different part. Any Linux server for a database admin, we will connect with the username and password. Right. And then once you connect it to your server, like there's a simple command, like I can just give a few example. I can directly run this host name. That's going to give you host name. Sometimes you can see only Oracle Lab 1. So if you want to get the fully qualified host name, you can do -f. The host name -f will give you a fully qualified host name. The moment you do host name -i, it's going to give you IP address of that. Right now it is giving a wrong IP address because I have not configured DNS server here. Right? This is my brand new server, which is just configured. I have not configured any DNS server. So it's giving a wrong IP address. Even though this is a valid IP address, it's giving a wrong IP address because I don't have a DNS server. If I run the same command here on this rack setup here, I should get a valid IP address. Right, so that's one thing, right? You can get this hostname -i. And other thing is the moment you do ifconfig, you're going to get how many interfaces are associated with the particular VM in P1 and this S3 and S8. There are 2 interfaces are associated on this one, and this is IP address and this is IP address. And then this IP, how we can change it? You can go to the GUI mode here, go to this application, system tools, settings, and then you can configure here and go to IPv4. You can manually edit it, or you can do a DHCP, or you can off it, on it, do whatever you want in this GUI mode, or with the command line if down. If down is the one, you can down it, and if up, you can make it up. But I'm doing if down and if up only on this interface. What happens if I do if down on this one? You're going to lose your connection here, right? Because you connected with that particular interface, that IP here. The moment I do if down this interface, my session will terminate here because you're connected with that particular interface. If you're connected with this particular IP, you can do if down and if up of this particular interface. So you should be very careful which interface you're bringing down. Or otherwise, like you can go to a GUI mode, you can bring it up and bring it down. So you're not going to lose any session because it's the GUI screen, the physical server access. That's other thing about the IP addresses, right? You can get your hostname -a. Hostname -a is the other thing you can get it. Hostname -a. No. ifconfig is one thing what we explained just now. Okay. And then you can go to this etc network script. You can check those interfaces, what are configured, how they configured. If I go to this is what like etc sysconfig network script, and if I do ls-ltr, I can see those 2 interfaces, ifcfg, S3 and S8. These are the 2 interfaces. And if I go with this S8, it's a static IP address. So if you see here, where is that DHCP? Proto. Okay, they're not mentioned. Okay, if you see this IP address, and if you're seeing any IP addresses inside your any of these interfaces, that indicate this is a static IP addresses, not a coming with your network provider. Manually, you have assigned these IP addresses. If I go with the ENS S3, you don't see that IP addresses for that. So you don't see any IP addresses for that. Your S3, your interface S3, you don't see any IP addresses for that. But what you are seeing here, type internet proxy method none, browse only. Okay, here boot proto, you are seeing boot proto equal to DHCP. That indicates this particular interface is a DHCP IP address. IP address is automatically assigning for this one. Your boot proto equal to DHCP. Here in this case, boot proto equal to none. And if you make it as a none, it means DHCP IP is disabled here. Automatically IP is not assigning. In that case, you have to manually assign your IP addresses, right? So we are sure, like, the second interface, we have given manually IP addresses. For the first interface, we have not given the IP address. We have DHCP server has given, like, this is the first interface. If I go here and if I go to IPv4, so IP address is DHCP allocation. And if I go to the second one, so if I go to IPv4, the manual assignment, so that you can verify it with this particular interface files here. What is the location for these files? It will be inside your etc sysconfig network scripts. That's about the networking. And what else? Yeah, and few things, few important basics here. Once you log in, the whichever user you connected, you are going to see that particular username here. Username @ your server name. You are logged in with a root user here. If I go here, if I exit here, so I logged in with the Malik user now. So root is a master user. Root can log into any other user. For example, if I do SU is a switch user, I can simply switch to Malik user. Like, I don't know Malik user password. I simply do SU Malik user. The root can log into that Malik user without password, because that's a root is a master user in this particular server. So you can see directly Malik user connected. So now I'm at Malik user. If I want to switch to any other user, for example, if I want to switch to root, I should enter that root password, then only it will go. Otherwise, it will not go. And then few other things, what all the users are available in this particular Linux server. I should check here, like, I should do cat/etc passwd. So this passwd is a file. If I cat that one, you're gonna see there are, like, plenty of default service account. These are your service account. You can see up to your TCP dump. These are your service accounts, right? And then only one user, that is Malik user, got created on this particular server. By looking at this passwd file, you can just predict like what all users are got created. That's the only Malik user I can see. This is also one of the service account. Then how to verify whether the only Malik account is created here? So you can go to home directory /home and then enter, and then do ls-ltr. So you can see that particular user directory got created here, Malik user directory. By looking at this home directory and by looking at this etc passwd, you can say that in this particular server only Malik user created. If I want to add one more user, I simply use user add. I can say John. I'll just say John. User add is a command to create a new user inside your Linux server. So if I do pwd, I'm at home directory /home. So ls-ltr. So you can see Malik and John, two users are available in this particular server. If I do cat again of my etc password file, I can see John also got added to my password file. See, Malik was here and John also got added here, right? These are their home directories, home, and then particular John and Malik. If I do like, John user got created, but he don't have any password set. So I can use passwd or like, passwd John. So the moment I use passwd John, it'll ask enter the new password for the John. So I can enter password for that John. So John user created and password also set for that. And then I can connect like this, like, I can take IP address, I can take one session, and then I can connect with the John user. So the moment I connect with the John, and then it'll ask for the password. If I enter the password directly, like, you can see John user connected. And if I do pwd, pwd stands for present working directory. The moment any user logs in, he will log into his home directory, home, the John. And if I log in with Malik user now here with the same IP address, the same server, if I connect with Malik user, right? So if I connect with Malik user will go to his home directory. Like if you see connected with Malik user, if I do pwd present working directory, you will go into home Malik user. They will go to their own respective home directories, right? Where is that one? Okay. John, this Malik, and else what else here? Okay. Yeah, these are few of the basics, like what are user. The moment you create like user add Oracle, again when you're dealing with the Oracle installation, we're going to create user called Oracle, and then that Oracle user also will be having its own directory, and then we're going to do passwd Oracle, and then Oracle user also we're going to set the password. So these all activities, whatever I'm showing here, it'll all will done by your Linux admin, but you have to give the details. I want a Oracle user, and they will create a Oracle user. I want a grid user, they will create a grid user, and I want these many groups, they will create a groups. That's how in industry works, because as a DBA will not be having a root access on any of the server. Everything will be like done by your Linux admin, but as a DBA we have to mutually we have to closely work or coordinate with the Linux admins, and then we have to create all these users and directories, right? Yeah, those we'll discuss more things once we start our regular classes. Yeah, that's pretty much about the users and the networking concept and the Linux parts, right? Yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover for today. Anybody has any questions so far? Like there are two more topics we can quickly touch base here now. Uh, as part of like yesterday's demo, I just demonstrated this one, right? I talked about MRPM, right? This MRPM here, you can pretty much install, right? Like as part of your Oracle installation, right? Like I said ASM installation and database installation. So as part of your ASM installation, database installation, you have to install certain RPMs, right? Like how you're going to install RPMs. So how you're going to install these RPMs? So you can, if you are configured with your M repository here, like I'm talking about M repository will be inside your etc m.repo.d. If I go to my this lab here, cd/etc m.repo.d, so ls-ltr. So by default, Oracle Linux VL7 repository will be like created here. So you no need to worry at all. Like the moment you install your Linux server, automatically the M repo will be set up here. Only thing is this particular lab should have access to internet. How we can verify whether this lab has access to internet? You can simply do ping google.com. Right. If you're getting that response, it means this particular server has a open access to internet. So if you have open access to internet and you're configured with your M repository, and you can simply install RPM, whatever RPM you want. First thing is like, I'm just going to give demonstration on Telnet is one of the RPM. Whether Telnet is installed or not in this server, you can simply do RPM-QA pipeline grep Telnet. The Telnet is one of the RPM. Like just to give you like for the basics, right? For the new guys, what is this RPM? How that exe files, right? In Windows, like any software you want to install, it should be exe file. For example, I said this Virtualbox, right? If I go to properties of this file, you can see this is a .exe. That's a executable files in my Windows. So similarly, any package, any RPM in Linux, we will call it as a RPM. Any package you want to install, we'll install it as a RPM. In this here in Linux, we can call it as RPM. So that RPM, we can tell it as like, we can check it out whether that RPM is installed or not using this RPM command. RPM-QA grep telnet, which will tell you whether that Telnet RPM is installed or not. It says Telnet is not installed here, right? Telnet no return values, like it means Telnet is not installed. So I can simply do m install Telnet. So what it will do, it will directly connect to internet because it has an open internet access here. And then it will go to your etc m repository, and then it will look for this repo file. And in this repo file, it will be connected to my Oracle M repository. and then it will download the RPM and it will install it here. And you can see it connected to my public M repository, Oracle M repository, and it found one Telnet RPM. And do you want to download that RPM? It's a 64K. Yes, I want to download. And yes, so it has installed my Telnet RPM here, installation and completed. If I run the same query here, RPM QA grep Telnet, you can see that RPM got installed here. You can see the Telnet RPM got installed. How this RPM got installed? With help of this command, yum install Telnet. The moment you do yum install Telnet, it will immediately go to your etc .repo.t. Inside that, you're going to read this repo file. And inside that repo file, it will be pointing to Oracle M repository. If I do cat of that file, so these are your public M repository, http m your oracle.com, and then it's gonna download the RPM and it will install it here. That's the, if you're like configure properly M repository. So this M repository will be default comes here. If you want to configure it manually, you can follow this particular site here. Let's go here. Right. So what it's a manual way of creation of M repository. What you need to do, go into your etc m.repo.t and you can create any file with that .repo, malik.repo or ul7.repo, whatever the file you can create. You can just copy this content and then put it inside that particular repo file, and then your M repository is ready. Nothing much. So you can see this what it contains here: ul7 latest archive and connecting to your base URL, that's Oracle URL, and then you're gonna download from that and it'll install it here. That's your M repository. Manually you can create it by like this, or the moment you install your OEL, automatically the M repo will be set up for you. That's the one thing. Or like sometimes due to security reason, your ping Google is not working. So customer is not exposed this particular server into internet. That time, how you can do it? You can manually download the RPM and you can install it. How you can do that? This is my OEL6 or OEL7. I can go to my Oracle Linux here, Oracle Linux 7. I can manually download that. I can go with the latest x86 64 RPM package here. I can manually download that Telnet RPM. Find Telnet. Right. So this is my Telnet RPM here. I just search a Telnet inside that OEL7, the latest RPMs. I can just download this Telnet manually. I can just download it here, Telnet. Right. So Telnet RPM is downloaded. If I go here, not here, here. Here is the Telnet. Okay, this is the Telnet RPM. You can see .rpm. Telnet RPM got downloaded here. So you can use a WinSCP and then copy that one to your Linux server. I can just do WinSCP. That's a built-in tool, comes with your Windows. WinSCP, I can give that my Linux IP address here, ifconfig. And then I can give the username and then the password. No. Right, so you got it here, your Windows connected here, your Linux connected here. Go to your desktop, Oracle database course, your Telnet RPM, what you downloaded. You can just drag and drop it to your Linux box. I can just drag and drop it here. So you can see your RPM came here. So if I cd enter, ls-ltr, so you got your RPM here. So you can manually install your RPM. So using this command here. M install is the one which needs your M repository. If you don't have M repository, you can manually use this RPM, IVH, and that RPM name. RPM, IVH, and then the name. It says your RPM is already installed here. RPM-QA grep telnet. So this RPM is already installed. What I'll do, I'll just RPM-E. RPM-E is to remove your installed RPM. This is installed RPM. I'll just give RPM-E, that installed RPM. It's done. So RPM is removed here now. If I do the same thing, right? No RPM installed. Now I can go ahead and then do that same command. Right. So I can do the same M RPM-IVH. That one right here. RPM, IVH, and my RPM name, right? So got installed here. This is the manual way of installation. Manually download your RPM, copy it to your Linux server, and use this IBH command, and you can install your RPMs. That's a manual method. Manually download and install it. If you have configured with the REM repository, directly do m install and telnet. IVH is to install the new RPM. UVH is to upgrade your RPM. So right now, if you see you are installed with this 64, and now you want to install this 17.65, you can download this one, latest one, 65 or 66. You can upgrade it using this UVH. U is for upgrade. And to check that RPM, same command, RPM QA grep telnet, and to remove -e, right? That's about, you can play around your RPMs with the M command or with RPM command. Right, guys. So that's pretty much, if I try explaining, it will be too much. I can start explaining till, the advanced concept and all. But that's, I think, that's enough for now. And then once we start our regular classes, we'll be regularly discussing about the Linux commands, other stuffs. Right, I'll put a pause here, and then if you have any queries, anybody has any questions, we can take it them. Otherwise, we are good to wrap up for today, and then we'll see you on Monday with the regular classes.
Yeah, sir. Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sanjay.
Sir, I installed ready VMs.
Mm-hmm.
I downloaded. So it's showing like a text file.
Oh yeah, I got your point. Like, see what you need to do in that case, right? Let's go here. The moment you download, you should see this rar file, WinRAR file, right? You can see whatever you're seeing here. You should see this WinRAR file here. So if you don't have that WinRAR software, you will see that kind of a text file. So you have to download that WinRAR.
I have, sir.
Okay, okay, you have to install that WinRAR software. Then you can extract that one here.
Okay.
You got it, right? You have to install that WinRAR software into your Windows. You can just go to Google, search for WinRAR, and then you can download that WinRAR software. Download WinRAR, and then you can install it. Once you install this WinRAR, then you can able to extract that file.
Okay.
Right click, and then you can do extract here or extract wherever you want.
Okay, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. So anybody has any questions, queries? If not, then we're good to wrap up for today, guys. All right. We'll see you on our regular classes starting from Monday, guys. And then if anybody interested or anybody willing to continue with this course, feel free to ping me on my WhatsApp, 9880616848, or else you can refer my blog or YouTube channel. I already posted that course details and other details. You can, on top of this, if you have any further queries or questions, whatever it is, feel free to call me on my cell number or ping me on my WhatsApp, or also you can mail me on my email ID. I can connect with one-to-one each of you guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Malik, 1 minute, Malik. So the meeting ID will be the same one to join on Monday, or any different ID will be shared by?
No, these are like public ones. So whoever registered will be already created with the WhatsApp group, and all the communication will happen in that WhatsApp group. I'm gonna create a new meeting ID and I'll share it in our WhatsApp group. And then we're gonna use the same meeting ID for the entire course. I'm gonna give it on Sunday so that, from starting with Monday, we can use that link.
Registered link, have you shared it to anyone? Like, still I didn't get any registered.
No,
registration.
not yet. Okay. Sunday, day after tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, I'm gonna give the details.
Okay.
No, sir. Sir.
Yeah. Yeah, Sanjay.
Sir, this two videos, these two demo classes, where will store? Sir?
I can share that details in our group.
Okay.
All right, guys. Any more queries?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Sir, that SQLs, like you were saying that SQLs access we will be getting. What
Right.
SQLs we will be getting in that?
It will be complete of your SQLs. Whatever that SQLs basics needed for that. How to create a
Okay.
table, how to create a view, how to create a synonym, how to insert a data into table, and what is the integrity, what is primary key, what is foreign key. Those are like your basics of SQLs.
Okay,
You
all
can,
SQL queries, right?
yes, all SQL queries.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right.
Hi, sir.
Yep.
Sir, in our course, RAC will be, you will explain RAC concept or not?
One or two chapters. I'm just comparing with the rack and standalone, and then some basics of rack. Hardly one class, I can say. Not complete of rack. Rack is a separate course, so we'll be covering some of the basics of rack. What exactly difference between your rack and database and other things will be covered, but not anything specific to rack courses, because rack is a separate course.
Okay, sir.
All right. Any more questions, queries, guys? All right, guys. All the best, and then we will see you on Monday. Have a great and happy weekend.
Hi, sir.
Yep. Hey,
Sir,
Rafi.
your cell number, sir. Cell number, sir.
I can ping here in the chat. Probably whoever don't have it, it will be like +91 9880 616 848. So I pinged here in the chat. Whoever don't have my cell details, contact details, you can ping me on this. I posted here in the chat. All right, guys. Okay, Gaurav is asking yesterday demo session. Gaurav, ping me on my WhatsApp number, the same number, whatever I pinged here, +91 9880 616 848. This is my WhatsApp number. I can already shared the demo link, yesterday demo class. I can share you one more time. All right, guys. Any last queries, questions?
Can you send the syllabus also, Malik? Good morning.
Yeah, ping me on my WhatsApp. I already explained yesterday's demo class. Probably I can share you the demo class. You can go through that. Or else, like, you can ping me on my WhatsApp. I can share all the details one more time.
Sir, will you cover anything from the database data guard perspective?
Data guard, right? Like I showed you yesterday, right? We'll be covering data guard end to end, right? Have you?
ASM also?
Yeah, ASM also covered, right? Again, like a lot of things we covered. I think, have you guys attended yesterday's class?
RAC?
Rack is not part of this one.
Database upgrade?
Everything will be covered.
Manual or GUI base?
Is
Right.
data guard there?
Data guard is there, database upgrade is there, patching is there. Your in the database upgrade, your PDBs and CDBs, your ASM architecture.
No, database upgrade.
Database upgrade also there. I explained yesterday, right? Probably you missed yesterday's session, right?
Yes.
We talked about database upgrade of 5 methods. Your DBA, manual upgrade, your DB upgrade, shell script, Perl script, auto upgrade. There are 5 to 6 database upgrade. Out of that, we'll be covering 2 or 3, and rest of that you can practice it out. But we'll be explaining and we'll be given all the detailed steps for all those 5 or 6 ways of database upgrades.
Patching also, PSU.
Patching, PSU, CPU, bundle patch, one-off patch, merge patch, your release update, RU update, everything will be covered here.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, probably I can share you that yesterday's demo class. We explained everything in details yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. Ping me on my WhatsApp number, guys.
Okay,
Whoever need that.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Thank you all. I will see you on Monday.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.